Welcome to Military Faith and Spiritual Resilience. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. Here with me is Erin Nichols, nutrition and fitness coach and Gold Star wife. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Thank you for continuing your story with us.
Happy to.
So, at the end of the last episode, you were sharing that you'd just gotten word that Sam was injured, seriously injured, and you were on your way to see him at the hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. Could you continue your story there?
Yes, nice German pronunciation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Landstuhl. Wait till I bring up Rammstein. Yeah, so it was kind of crazy because just the whirlwind of the travel and, changing time zones, going to the other side of the world. And we left Sacramento, so, the west coast of the United States at 3 o'clock on Thursday. And then we arrived in Germany at around 7 a.m. Saturday.
Oh, my.
Germany time.
Mm-hmm.
Pacific time, it was still our 4th wedding anniversary.
Oh, my goodness, Erin.
So he got hit July 24th. July 27th was our wedding anniversary. So, Donnie and I, my brother-in-law and I were traveling basically on our anniversary. And then when we got there, it was really overcast. And because it was overcast, our sense of time was so destroyed at that point. Just could not tell what time of day it was. And the sun, the lack of sun, the sky wasn't helping. And I want to say it was like 2 to 3 hour drive or something like that from Frankfurt to Landstuhl as well. In our non-German Ford Taurus, our boring Ford Taurus. And a Marine liaison drove us and then brought us to the hospital. And the weirdest part when we went in to see him was that his head was shaved.
Huh.
And when he first got to boot camp, they shave your head. You don't get the jar head cut until toward the end of boot camp. You don't rate it, as they would say. But I had never seen him with that. By the time he graduated boot camp, he had, a medium reg haircut. He had hair on top.
Sure.
And so that was like the first thing I noticed was that he basically had like a buzz cut. Like a number 1 all over, and there were tubes, and he had literally a bolt that was kind of at the front of his hairline. There's a bolt on one side and a drain on the other, sticking out of his head. But his face wasn't injured at all, and so he just looked like him. But he had a breathing tube in his mouth, down his throat, and then, tubes and wires everywhere else. But yeah, it was the shaved head that was the thing that really, took me aback. So we kind of got briefed on what his status was. He was critical but stable. Got the tour of his injuries. Besides the brain injury, he had a fractured neck, the facets, I think, at C3 or C4. So he was in a C-spine collar. His spinal cord was fine. He had broken his arm, his right arm, in 2 places, his upper arm and his elbow. And then there was a big, gash. So he had all these wound vacs all over him. And they told me before that he had burns. And so I'm, learning all of this stuff. I didn't know what a wound vac was until that point. So I'm seeing these things, and it turns out it's the wound vac, where it's like this sponge, kind of looks like the soft cover that goes over a microphone, that color. And then it's literally under this almost like saran wrap thing, and then it's under suction. And so it sucks down into the wound and is drawing out the bits. And but I just see this big black stuff that's covered, and I thought these were all burns.
Oh.
So I see this thing on his right arm, and then there's a huge one on his hip. He lost on his right hip, the side where the blast was, just a lot of the meat from his right buttock and hip, and then about half of his calf muscle, and a good chunk from the front of his shin as well. So he lost 3 inches of his fibula, the small bone in the lower leg. And then he had a big gash. There's probably a 10 to 12 inch suture scar on his low back. And broken ribs. They had chest tubes and things like that. Ruptured his spleen. So yeah, a lot was going on with him. And even having kind of that physical stuff to focus on was almost a nice distraction from the coma.
So the coma was more distressing.
Yeah.
Than the wounds.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you can live a really great life with, without a limb or two, or with some gnarly scars, but life in a coma is a little different.
It is. What were they giving you if he was critical? Were they giving you any idea on prognosis at that point?
Not at that point, while we were in Germany. And so we only ended up spending like 24 hours in Germany, kind of as they anticipated. So, and that was kind of as long as he remained stable. The plan is, there was a plane going out. We got there Saturday morning. There was a plane going out from Ramstein on Sunday, medevac back to DC. So Donnie and I stayed at Fisher House, and the next morning, only one of us could fly on the medevac. So Donnie had to go back with the Marine liaison back to the Frankfurt airport and fly commercial. And I went on the medevac. We had an amazing Air Force medical team. I can't remember the doctor and the nurse's name. I can picture them. But I know the respiratory therapist was a tech sergeant, and her name was Tammy. And they were incredible, and they took such good care of me. And so they had 2 critical patients, Sam and another patient who were both unconscious. And on the plane, I was thinking of, I could do this. Like, I was still only 23. It wasn't too late to join the Air Force. And so I'm kind of thinking like, well, if this goes the way it's looking like it's going to go, I could join the Air Force. I had certainly thought about it before, and I'd always been interested in medical stuff. Physical therapy in particular had been what I was interested in. And so seeing this Air Force crew made me think like, well, I really don't like flying. I get bad motion sickness. I didn't want that part of it, but just the idea of like the team that they were working on and what they were doing and what it meant to me. And I thought like, I would love to be able to do that. So I was kind of pondering, what life might be like.
So you're having to, it's not like you don't want Sam there. It's like you're having to face the reality that you may be alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It was probably the most seriously I'd ever actually considered it in joining the Air Force. I briefly thought about it in high school. I would have been able to get the ROTC scholarship, and I would have got paid to go to college if I did that. But I was in love, and I wanted to wait and see what Sam was doing, and I wasn't that into the idea of joining the Air Force. To be honest, I was more like afraid of basic training, which, that's kind of funny. Think about Air Force basic training to be afraid of, but the idea of moving away from home and all that kind of stuff, and especially of leaving Sam. But yeah, I was really considering, I think this is what, if he had died then, I think I would have joined the Air Force and, maybe even done it as a career. Came from an Air Force family. So that was one of the things that struck me too, just in general, the like cross service response on the casualty assistance side of things. I had no idea how collaborative it would be. There were times when I got off the plane at Andrews, I want to say it was a soldier who came and met me. Army Landstuhl is an Army hospital, but the Army and the Air Force basically take turns
Okay.
6 months or something like that, whatever it is. Basically, who's running Launch Stool, and I think who's running the hospital in Kuwait, I think it is. I could be wrong on that. So I think it's only the commander that like stays the same, the Army commander. And so it happened to be Air Force run basically while we were there. And then when we got to Bethesda Naval Hospital, this was before Walter Reed and Bethesda had merged.
Right.
We had our Marine liaisons, who's basically all these Marines whose job it is to serve the injured Marines and their families. And that is what they're there for. And then the mostly Navy staff. There were some Army staff there as well, but mostly the medical staff was all Navy. And just had the we were so well taken care of, especially the Marines' families, because it was a Navy hospital, and it was set up. So we had the Navy Lodge right there, and the base basically exists to support the hospital. It was a very small base, and they have the Navy Lodge there, and they got us rooms. The liaisons were there to coordinate with, anything we needed, but especially like with flights. So, we're on the opposite side of the country, and all sorts of our family, our close, immediate family wanted to be there with us.
Sure.
And so all we had to do was say, this person or these people want to leave on this date from this airport. And they would make it happen. They would send out this information to, this like pool of charities that they had. Somebody would pick up the flight, pay for it, and then at the time it was called the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. Now it's Semper Fi in America's fund. Would cut a check to that person based on the amount of time that they were going to be there, just to help cover expenses back at home. You still have to pay your rent. Even your stay at the Navy Lodge is free, but you still have to pay your rent or your mortgage or whatever and your bills. Plus, you're having to eat out every single meal. And it costs money just to be away from home. And so it really made it easy for our family to be there for us.
That's really super.
Yeah. That part was really, really incredible. Just how much help there was, and how much collaboration. I was kind of laughing because just the bureaucracy within the Marine Corps, and I'm sure this is the same across branches. It was like on the casualty assistance side, it was just everything just ran so smoothly, which is amazing. But it was like, why can't this happen inside?
So now you're Bethesda Naval Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing? What's going on for you? Because now you're day into the hospital and then back to the house at night, right?
It was rough. Yeah. The ICU there, it was the 3rd floor. And the way that the buildings are built, any of the windows were blocked off by the next part of the building. And so it just had this dungeon quality to it.
Oh, lovely.
Which didn't, add to the atmosphere. I was just really in shock and like, I can't believe this is happening kind of feeling. I remember there was like the ICU waiting room, the family room right outside, and there were puzzles in there, and that was usually kind of what we would do to just kind of pass the time. And there was this other family in there, and now I know that this guy was probably very, very seriously injured. But I just remember like the wife or the mom or whatever coming back, and they're talking about these things that he's doing. Sam wasn't doing anything. Sam was in the absolute lowest form of a coma that you can possibly be in. And I remember feeling like jealous and irritated that they basically had like positive things to talk about. Now, the positive things we're talking about, it was probably like he was like squeezing a hand or blinking or something like that, like really small things. But it was something, and we had nothing at that point. So, yeah, grief does some rough things. And the thing that the thing that I was really grieving, and two, I was just talking to someone recently about this. When Sam died, I grieved his death, obviously, his absence. But a lot of the grieving that happens, particularly I think when you lose a spouse or significant other, is the grief for your future. And it has a lot to do with you as an individual, your personal future, because you were supposed to be together. You were supposed to be drinking lemonade on the porch, watching the grandkids play.
You're grieving for what will not be.
Exactly. So that was happening. And just in my mind, what is the rest of my life going to be like if it's not going to be what we thought it was? We're supposed to be going to University of Nevada, Reno next semester. And we still didn't know what we necessarily wanted to be when we grew up, but we had somewhat of a plan. And now there was no plan. It was just, is he going to survive? And if he does, what does that look like? And it's certainly never anything that we had anticipated.
Can we continue this?
Yes.
Thank you, Erin.